Hey, everybody. This week we're mixing it up a little bit. Nathan Vass is an author, he's a filmmaker, a photographer, and a bus driver. Yes, Nathan drives a city bus through the streets of Seattle, and he drives Route 7, which is considered the most dangerous and notorious route in Seattle, and he often drives it late at night. From his spot at the front of his bus, he has seen all kinds of people, culture, and life situations that many of us never see. That turned into a blog post, which turned into a book, and now a second book, and life lessons that I think many of us could use and learn about our fellow man. Nathan looks right at people instead of looking past them, and that acknowledgement goes a long way. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. I really did as we ride along with Nathan Voss. No, it's good. I really enjoyed the book, and let's. It's a lot of things I want to discuss with you, Nathan, including my friend told me about you and your writings a couple of months ago,
Okay.
and the thing that struck me is I don't know if everybody does this, but when I see certain professions and I think about like what would it be like to have that job, and
Yeah.
like I've never bartended, but bartending's one of
Yeah.
them, and a metro bus driver, honestly, is one of the things I've thought about, like, what would that be like? And then he told me about your blog and your book, and I've read
Wow.
your first book. So I'm thrilled to get the chance to ask you these questions, and
This
to
is
hear from
fantastic.
you.
We finally get to address this. So, what is it like to be a bus driver? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I guess I'm curious, like, what drew you to being a bus driver, first of all, because you started young, and
Mhm.
like, how did you end up there?
I used to be so embarrassed to share this, but as a child, I was always infatuated with buses. Like all children, we're drawn to things that are large, like dinosaurs and,
Hmm.
trucks and so on. For me, it was buses. There was something their size, the
Hmm.
excitement of this whole network that you could use that connects the city. I remember being in Seattle for the first time because we grew up in Redmond, being in the International District and seeing the trolley wires, and the electric
Hmm.
buses running on them, and noticing that the bus came like every few minutes instead of once an hour or whatever it was back then on the east side. And that was all terribly exciting, and I enjoyed riding the bus as a youngster. It was sort of analogous to like a library, like a bus pass and a library card have
Hmm.
certain overlap in terms of they open doors to new worlds,
Hmm.
and that was the reason for my fascination at the time when I was younger. In college, which is when I applied, it was just a natural choice because it paid a lot and it was part-time and allowed me to, yeah, continue my studies at UW. And after that, though, after I got deeper into the job, I began to realize that the true appeal of this, of course, is the people
Hmm.
and the opportunity to spend time with them, to build relationships, and to just, as an artist, have this really vast reservoir of life experience to observe. It's enormously inspiring, rewarding. These are not things I thought about as a child when I was looking at the big bus in the International District, but
Yeah.
it is what draws me now.
Well, and then I think you write about this either in your blog or your books that as you got into high school, I believe you would take the bus on your own and you would go
Mhm.
into, so you grew up, Redmond's the suburbs for anyone that's not from the Northwest.
Uh-huh.
So you weren't necessarily a city kid, but you took the bus into the city. And did it, did it offer some freedom in a way, would you say, to be able to go out on that adventure on your own?
So much freedom that uh, I almost didn't know what to do with it. My parents were very trusting, and we should also underline that the East Side, Redmond at the time, it wasn't fancy yet.
Hmm.
Microsoft had not yet taken over. It was more of a working class suburb, and going into Seattle just felt like you were being inundated with more people, more experiences, more life, more things to explore. and that was irresistible. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you applied when you were in college. You went to the University of Washington and you studied photography, which, people need to check out your website to understand all these things you do because you're certainly an artist and very creative. But I mean this as a compliment. You're very youthful looking,
Thank you.
and you started driving when you were 21. I mean, did people have a hard time believing like
Oh,
you were
yeah,
the bus driver?
yeah. Every single day, sometimes at least once a day, but usually once a trip, someone would say, "Are you old enough to drive this bus? Do you even have a driver's license?" And I would come up with all sorts of different answers to that. Sometimes I would just say, "No, no, I'm not. This outfit's from Goodwill. I still,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a learner's permit." 21's the youngest you can be, and yeah, I looked young for a very long time. I suppose I still do, but now the youngsters can tell that there's a generational divide between myself and them. For the longest time, that wasn't the case, and
Yeah.
I could really get along well with the teenagers getting on Rainier Avenue. Now they see me as an authority figure who's older than them, which is a different dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of what makes you so interesting and why people have been drawn to you in your writing is not that just that you're a bus driver that writes about what happens on your route, but also you chose for the longest time to drive one of the more difficult routes, which is Route 7, which goes through a number of different types of neighborhoods. I think you describe it in your book as the country's most diverse zip code, which is the Rainier Valley. And so you drive a difficult route. Why do you drive that route, or do you still drive that route? I know you went off it for some time, but what drew you to not only bus driving, but to drive what some consider a difficult route, particularly at night?
Yes, and it's It's regularly discussed as the worst bus route. Everyone hates it. No one wants to drive it. Lots of people don't even want to ride it because it has so many security incidents. It's on the electric trolley bus. Those are harder to drive. It's a little like driving stick shift. You just have to be
Mm,
more focused. And but primarily the people are a major challenge. I'm drawn to it for a couple of reasons, but the biggest one is the people. There's research to suggest that in unsafe neighborhoods, a stronger sense of community is often fostered because people have to rely on each other in order to survive. When I started driving the bus, I drove out of Bellevue and Redmond. I was working out of East Base, and that's a great place to learn how to drive buses because the roads are very wide over there,
mhm.
um, and almost nothing ever happens in terms of security. But coming into the city was so exciting because suddenly people were quite a bit more talkative. And if you have to drive the bus for a whole shift, I want that to be interesting. I don't
Mm.
just want to be silent and alone for that entire time. I want to pass the time by chatting. And that can happen on the 7, and it happens on in working class and low income neighborhoods more than elsewhere, where people might be more plugged in with their
Mhm.
headphones and so on. And I just thought, gosh, this is a lot of fun. And when I was driving the 7 every night, it was long. It went from Rainier Valley all the way to the U District. Now it only goes from Rainier Beach to downtown.
Mhm.
Um, so it's maybe an hour round trip. Excuse me, an hour for one trip, one direction now, where it used to be at least an hour and a half. So that would create a situation where for about 5 years straight, I drove it every night because 2 round trips was your entire shift, and that just flies by. When you have to do a shorter trips over
Yeah.
and over again, that can feel more monotonous mentally,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was irresistible, and it was so long going through South Seattle and North Seattle. You really got everybody. That it was a joy to do, and I still drive it, couple days a week. I can't give it up entirely. It keeps me
Mhm.
sharp. I like staying connected with the people. It's a great crowd out there. I can't give it up.
Yeah, and the connection with the people is you've talked about it being a community. I mean, because you
Mhm.
get to know the faces, you get to know the people, right? I mean, is it
Yeah.
it becomes very familiar to you in many cases, I would assume.
It does become a sort of a small town thing in the big city where you see a lot of faces, and a lot of these folks don't speak the same language as me. You know, they hail from other countries, but smiling is it's so wonderful that smiling, the thumbs up, these are universal things that go across all languages, and
Mhm.
people really respond to being respected and seen and acknowledged. And the currency of the street, I like to tell people, is not money, perhaps not even love, but respect. You know, all fights on the street have to do with respect, perceived disrespect, etc.
Mm.
Um, Respect is the magical thing that solves not all problems, but certainly most of them. And if I just try to respect everyone, really helps out, especially in these types of areas.
And it's interesting because a lot of people look away from something that might be uncomfortable or different to them.
Hmm.
You're right. And we all do it. I mean, I do it
Sure.
too, right?
Me
But
too.
you make an effort to look into people. People, you just said it now, and you say in your book, you try to say hi to everyone getting on the bus, and
Yeah.
that interaction is sometimes to someone that is not getting that out there
Yeah.
on the street, perhaps, right? I mean, you talk about the conscious effort you make to connect with people.
I've been reflecting on this a lot, especially of late, where I make an effort to say hi to every single person who gets on, as you say. And I try to say hello to people I walk past on the sidewalk and so on. It's easier to do this when you're working, though, when you've got your work outfit on and it's
Mm,
sort of
yeah.
expected that you're greeting folks. I do wish I was better at this in my off hours. Having said that, um, I know that uncertainty can be scary, and I think a lot of people avoid interacting with other human beings because it involves uncertainty. The interaction may go south or it may become awkward or embarrassing. And I imagine that's why a lot of people choose to avoid interacting with others in public spaces. They get on through the back door of the bus instead of the front door. They wear their headphones. They're trying to minimize situations that are uncertain. For me, interacting with strangers, although it involves uncertainty, I know that the possible outcomes are just not a big deal, you know? Um, Either the person won't want to talk, or if it becomes awkward, I can leave. You know, it doesn't strike me as something worth avoiding. There are other types of uncertainty that freak me out. Scheduling is something I'm always trying to nail down. Um, Working in filmmaking, there's so much uncertainty about these long timelines and getting people to sign on and finding locations, and all of that just terrifies me.
Hmm.
But talking to strangers does not. And I do wish people were more up for exercising that muscle of interacting with their community neighbors, because it really is a muscle. It gets easier the more you do it, and it gets harder the less you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a thing for those that are in the Northwest that are listening to this. Nathan knows there's a thing called the Seattle freeze. And
There
that's
sure is,
like,
isn't there?
yeah, the Seattle people, they're nice, but they don't interact that much, and I have a friend in Atlanta, they just can't understand that. Right. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
different parts of the country.
yeah.
And you really try to fight that, you
I
say, and
really do.
I mean, we all should try and I'll walk my dog sometimes in my neighborhood, and a neighbor will walk by and they don't look up. So I
Yeah,
make an effort. Every car that passes my neighborhood, I try to I wave to. And now people
amazing.
they just know like, oh, there's a dog walker, he's going to wave, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you got to make there's more of an effort. It has to be made here in
More
the
of an effort has
Northwest.
to be made. Also, Greg, you're a saint. That's amazing. I love that you wave at all
I
these
don't know.
people.
I don't know if it's amazing, but it's just it's a test. It's a study of human nature. Because
Hmm.
what I've found is the car that's approaching now that didn't used to wave, they start the wave
Exactly.
because they know it's coming from me, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And they discover, oh, this isn't so bad. This feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I live outside of a retirement community.
Mm.
It's across the street. And the folks who live there are always going outside, walking their dogs, and etc. And that group is so easy to say hi to. I think because they stem from a generation where that was expected,
Hmm.
and it's like they get it. I can always say hi to them as I walk
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you made a decision at one point, you start driving, you made a decision to write about these things,
Yeah.
right? So you started with a blog. And I guess, was that, you're a very creative person, clearly, by all the things you do, photography and filmmaking and writing. You've written 2 books. But it started with the blog. And I
Mhm.
wonder, was that scary to you to put your thoughts out there?
I think we were living in a different environment in 2012, which is when I began the blog. I wasn't particularly worried about negative fallout or being misinterpreted. I also never expected the blog to become popular. If I was to do all this a second time, maybe I'd use a different name or think
Mm,
more carefully about things like that. But at the time, I thought, oh, you know what? I'm just everybody writes blogs. I'll show this will be a way that I show my friends. Here's what I'm doing when I'm working. No big deal. And also, it was also very much for myself. I wanted to have a repository of here are some of these beautiful things that I'm experiencing that I'm not going to be able to remember if I don't write them down. Yeah, yeah, and so
yeah.
I was
And so
surprised when it became popular, yeah.
And so you're writing these things down. I mean, so you're driving. A lot of times you're driving at night. You're driving
Yeah,
the roughest route,
mhm.
which is fodder for good material and less life experience. But how are you? How are you remembering these things? Are you
Yeah,
writing it down as soon as you get home, or how do you handle that?
as soon as whoever it is gets off the bus, I start scribbling on one of those paper transfers. I'm trying to grab everything before I forget it, and then when I get to the end of the trip, then I really sit down and, like I used to scribble on paper towels and napkins and whatever was
Yeah,
available, um and try to get all the notes down of what took place, especially the dialogue. Very important for me to grab the dialogue as accurately as possible. Everything else you can kind of reconstruct through memory, but I like getting specifically what people said, how they said it, what their word choice is, the sort of cadence and rhythm of their speech. These all form sort of a verbal body language that I think is very revealing. And so I would try to grab that, and it would be very challenging with two cool things happened on the same trip. So I'm
yeah,
not going to remember the first one, you know.
yeah,
um, but over time, it became kind of a muscle memory thing where you kind of get good at doing this very specific sort of weird memory exercise of remembering a conversation that took place 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. I always start with the last things that were said and sort of work my way backwards. Yeah.
yeah. And then it really, I mean, started to take off. I mean, people found this blog. They
Yeah.
found it interesting.
Blew
What
me
was
away.
that like when you're like all of a sudden you're like, people are picking up on this,
Well, transit, especially pre-COVID, was really used by all class groups in Seattle,
right?
and it remains such an ongoing citywide conversation. Everyone's got an opinion about transit. They've all got bus stories, and it's something. Buses and rail are just oddly very public. You see them everywhere, and so they become part of conversation, whether we use them or not. And I was very thrilled when people began responding to what I thought was a minority perspective that I was sharing. The idea that, gosh, we all have something in common. We're all just human. Let's celebrate these beautiful moments. Um, that work hopefully in counterpoint to all of the negative stuff that we get in from the news cycle. And I can see how it would be appealing to go on the blog every couple of days and here's another life affirming, optimistic moment that happened on the street that's real, that is hopefully given some sort of life by way of context through philosophical reflections, or I love art and art history, and why bringing that into the conversation as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your writing really spans a lot of different things, right? The a lot of positive interactions and some challenging ones too. I mean, of course, you're driving a difficult route, and you'll get people on that are drunk or on drugs or maybe have mental issues. You've had to navigate some tricky situations and kind of like de-escalate. So, how do
Yes,
you handle that by when you get confronted with a tough situation, what's going through your mind?
it's pretty tricky. I feel like de-escalating is the key word there. If there was some sort of magical, amazing sentence that could be spoken that would defuse everyone in every situation, then this job would pay minimum wage. It would be very
Mhm,
easy.
mhm.
The reason it pays well is because of these challenging moments, these situations where you really have to decide how you're going to respond. And for me, it helps to take a second before I try to respond. Sometimes not responding um, is wise because you're not trying to escalate the situation. There's a passenger. I haven't seen her in a while, but who rides the seven all the time, and she does a number of different things. She likes to talk loudly to herself in a way that is very disorienting and disturbing to other passengers because she's usually recounting a traumatic event from her life.
Hmm.
There's a single event that happened to her decades ago that she relives over and over again. And so you can imagine how that would be disconcerting to be around.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes when she'll start, yelling, of course, I want to ask her to stop yelling, but I also don't want to escalate the situation because this person also does some other things. She likes to light things on fire. She
Mm.
likes to go to the bathroom on the bus. I would rather have her yelling than lighting stuff on fire.
Right.
The passengers don't know that they may not know that she has a propensity for doing these other activities. And so I think to myself, you know what, it might just be better to let her run her mouth for a bit. Um, because that is not a safety concern. It's just an annoyance. And it's much better than if we antagonize her and get her to a place where she's doing other things. I think she likes me. How you know if she likes you is if she tears up small pieces of paper and then puts them into the fare box. Um, that means
That's a good sign?
you're on her good side. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. So you've learned a lot about communicating with people. I mean, you've done this, I think, 18 years. So it sounds like it's not just what you say to people, but how you say it sometimes too. I think
Yes.
there's some real lessons there.
Yes, and the how has so much to do with respect. Remembering that I'm intimating respect, especially in my tone. It's so important that I don't come off as pejorative or condescending. Um, a lot of people on the street know that they are looked down upon by many other members of society, and so they may assume that even if you're not doing that. Silence is sometimes misinterpreted as judgment, and so I have to go out of my way to say,
Hmm.
"Hey, how are you? Come on in," um, and really communicate that I respect you, basically. And if they're mentally unstable, that may not land, and there's nothing I can do about that. If they are in any way stable, I've got them,
Hmm.
and this will work out. And uh, the ability of me to do that has been limited by now the more recent policy where you can get on through any door of the bus.
Hmm.
If they get on through the back door, I don't have an opportunity to make eye contact, to smile, to say hello. Um, they don't know that I respect them. They just
Yeah.
go sit in the back and think I'm just another authority figure who looks down on them, and that's disappointing. And it exacerbates safety issues. If I was in charge of Metro, I would encourage front door boarding, but I'm aware that there's an argument against that because it slows everything down, and we also want to keep the buses moving. So it's one of those situations where there's no perfect answer. Um, in terms of thinking about how we say stuff, and um, I know we're going to talk about Sean Yim. I guess we may as well talk about Sean Yim
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
If Sean Yim, um, okay, well, do you want to give some
So
background?
Sean Yim, yeah, for those that don't know, Sean Yim was a fellow driver of yours, Metro driver, who in I think it was late 24 was driving at night, got in a confrontation with a rider, ended up he was sprayed with pepper spray, ended up on the street, and he was stabbed, and he died. And so he was killed by a rider that was later caught a couple of days later. So there was confrontation. Obviously, it was not a justified action by any means, but I did want to ask you about that. It was, when you think of that situation, clearly it shows the danger of that occupation and the trickiness of dealing with people that are unstable at times.
It sure does. I was so disappointed when I heard that it was Sean. First, you hear that, oh, the bus driver got killed. Of course, that's tragic. And then you hear, oh, it's this guy that you really like. I really liked
Hmm.
Sean Yim. I enjoyed calling him by his full name all the time because it made him laugh.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I never try to change other people's minds, or get them to think how I think. I just try to give people the maximum amount of room to be who they are. Sean had a very different outlook on people and on the job than I did. Um, and I didn't try to change that at all. He was like my grumpy Korean uncle,
Hmm.
and I enjoyed chatting with him. We always had a good time. And it's just tragic that he's gone. If he was alive, if he was still here, back from the dead, and I was to ask him, what do you think about that whole thing, where you died? I think he would say, I don't think Sean would say, I did the right thing. All drivers should do exactly what I did. No, I think he would say, you know what? I made a mistake. I should have done this instead of doing this. But the thing is, in life, there really ought to be room to make mistakes without having to die for making the wrong
Right.
decision. Um, the Sean Yim tragedy teaches us that the margin for error for dealing with people on the street is extremely small,
Yes.
and that is not ideal. We don't want to live in a city where we have to take into account that level of risk all the time, and that is the headspace that people who work on the street, who live on the street, who travel through the street have to be thinking. And that's just not good. We want that to change. We want a shift. And if you walk down Third Avenue, the people who spend time on Third, whether they're people using drugs, people selling drugs, people living on the street, commuters riding buses, first responders, cops, bus drivers, these individuals encompass the full totality of the political spectrum. But there's one thing they would all agree on, which is that the state of affairs on Third Avenue is a disaster and has remained one for the last 5 years. And it would be nice to see changes that
Yeah.
would get rid of that so that
So
there's room
third.
to make mistakes when you talk to people
Yeah,
on the
and it's
street.
hard. It's hard, So Third Avenue for folks is right downtown Seattle, and the 7 runs through Third. Is that right?
It
Yeah,
does,
and,
yes.
yeah. And so Third. I mean, it's not fair to call it, our version of Skid Row, because LA, that's a much bigger
Hmm.
thing, but it is like that, and that there's like you said, there's a lot of nefarious activities and people coming and going, and regular people trying to catch the bus. But it does, Sean's death does speak to the danger of what you do. And it's there's something you talk about that drivers have something called the fall, I think you
Yeah,
said it's
yeah.
called. And that's like, hey, you ride the seven, you drive the seven long enough, you'll become jaded, or you'll want off of it. And I could understand that, and I'm not saying Sean was like that, but most people would probably react like he did,
Mhm. You
versus
get
how you
frustrated.
might.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get frustrated, right? You get fed up by being, challenged all the time. How do you not become jaded?
I remember another driver telling me that if something happens to you that is like a thorn in your side or an annoyance, if on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most extreme, even if it's just a 1, it's something to work on and think about. Um, like if this translates into physical pain, if there's an ache that you're experiencing that's only a 1, it is still worth looking into while it's a 1 before it gets worse. And so this guy was applying the same approach to how we think about what happens on the bus, how we think about these various behaviors. And I have to sign up every day for the idea of I'm going to go into this looking for the positive, hence the title Deciding to See.
Hmm.
um, I'm going to search for the humanity here, and I'm going to give out humanity. And like we're saying about the Seattle Freeze, it has to be us who initiates the interaction. It has to be me who initiates the assumption of positivity, um, of goodness in this other person, however latent or however obvious. And that takes a lot of mental effort, but I
It
try.
does.
Yeah.
You, to me, it sounds like, I mean, you lead with compassion. You can hear that. You clearly
I
see
hope
it in your
so.
writing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's apparent. I mean, in your writing and just what you said there, not all of us do that. And it's easy not to. And I think we forget that reading your book and your blog really made me think about this. And I think, it will for a lot of people about how we see others, right? And we forget that people are going through things, right? And like you don't know what that other person, did they just
Exactly.
lose their job? Did they just lose, a loved one? And it's a helpful reminder, I think, that we could use more compassion on a day-to-day basis. And I think you offer that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very much. I remember a homeless guy talking to me one night, and he said a line that's always stuck with me, which was, "No one's life makes sense from the outside." And it was such a succinct
Mm.
encapsulation of, yeah, everyone is fighting their own battles, and it's very difficult to divine what's going on in their lives, when we're not in them. Yeah, so I just
So
try to give them space to do that.
and so your first book was The View from Nathan's Bus, which is really a lot of the blog articles that your observations. But
Mhm.
then Deciding to See is your second book, and how is that different than the first one? You touched on it a little bit.
The second book, it's much larger, and it's also more personal. It dives into a lot of there's a thematic undercurrent of grief and processing loss. Um, I was in a I happened to be in a terrorist attack in 2015 in Paris,
Mm,
and of course that surviving that engendered all kinds of reflections on death and mortality, the value of life, the strangeness of continuing to live after such an event when others had not,
mm.
and really recognizing gratitude as as a way forward, in terms a shortcut towards happiness, um, and also the value of grief. We in society we turn away from things like pain and grief as things that we should celebrate or talk about. But those are the things that cause us to grow and become. They represent an opportunity, at least, for tremendous growth, tremendous insight, the ability to accept, to find acceptance, to have peace with oneself and with what's going on, and to remember that other people are going through similarly challenging things, and giving them space to make mistakes and take their journey.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely thought provoking, and I think that's what's special about your writing. Um, I want to read something that I pulled from.
Yeah.
It was either an article you did or a blog, and
Okay.
I think it really summarizes what you're about with your choice to drive the bus and write about it. So these are your words. There is a set of faces numbering in the thousands whose existence I cherish, whom I see nightly. I see them more often than my friends. I've watched them graduate high school, get divorced, change their diets, buy homes, recover from accidents. I've seen them get pregnant, get addicted, get clean, die, live, lose, laugh, and live again. Mostly, I've listened. There is so much more, immeasurably more, than I can learn from them than they possibly could from me. The working souls who cross generations and oceans to speak our common language, that of a smile. The street brethren whose respect I feel lucky and honored to have earned. The high energy hive of the city's vortex, itself a breathing thing, and you're the central nerve running through it. The high of being at the center of the universe. I think that summarizes what you do so well, that you're watching these lives over many years in some cases. And do any come to mind for you of how you've watched people, maybe they came in addicted and then you saw
Mhm.
them get clean and things like that?
That's one of my favorite things about the job. Um, when someone comes up to me years later, you know, they used to be on the bus, on the street, falling asleep in the back of the bus, and then you don't see them for a long time, and then you see them again, and they're doing well, and they tell you that they're doing well, and you notice that it's so important for them to tell you, the bus driver, about this. Why is that? I'm more or less a stranger to them. I'm not friends or family. I think it's important for them to tell me, because I was the one who saw them when they were at their worst. I imagined they concealed the crappiness of their state of existence from their friends and family, whose opinions they respected during their hard time. But I was there and I saw them, and now they want to tell me, look, I rose up from that. And the bus driver is the one who can recognize and perceive that the fullest, because
Yeah.
I got to see both ends. And I love those moments when they happen. Um, of course, I wish that for all the people that I continue to see, but a lot of times they just vanish and then you never see them again. And you say to whoever else, hey, what happened to that one guy? And we don't know. Or we learn that they
Hmm.
died. And
Hmm.
boy, the street has just all emotions, all it's just the totality of existence collapsed into an intersection or into a bus. Thank you for reading that. It sounds good when you read it. Yeah.
Oh, no, I thought it really summarizes how what you see. I think that's why people are drawn to the blog and to your book, your view from the window into these worlds.
And also, you dove deep in your research, because that's not in. I mean,
That's that was an article somewhere that I
yeah,
saw
okay,
you. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
wow,
can't
thank you.
remember, but when I read it, I was like, oh, that really summarizes what you see. And I'm curious, when you think about the state of affairs, right? I mean, let's face it, during your career, you've kind of watched certain addictions come and go, or
Hmm.
maybe come,
Yeah,
like fentanyl now is the big problem. I mean, do
yeah,
you remember when fentanyl wasn't a problem
I
and you've
do. It was
watched the
awesome.
effect? Yeah.
I love when fentanyl was not yet here, and
Yeah.
it's been very sad to watch that
Yeah.
become so prevalent. It's different than other drugs because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
For less than $1, you can grab some at Third and Pike, and you get addicted almost instantly. It just fries your brain. Usually, you end up dying. It's incredibly easy to overdose on, and the high that it gives is miserable. It only lasts a couple of minutes, and it's just not worth it. I sound like somebody's mom, but it's
No,
true.
I mean, I think we all agree with
Yeah,
you.
totally. Yeah,
But you've watched it. Like, what does it feel like to watch, this kind of this wave
mhm.
overtake people?
Well, I'm amazed um, at how it didn't just wipe out everybody instantly
Hmm.
because of how easy it is to overdose on. When it first arrived, nobody knew how to use it yet, and so everybody was overdosing. You'd have all these rows of bodies covered in tarp in the early morning that the first responders were trying to get out of sight before the commuters come into Seattle
Wow.
because they didn't want them to see that. I wonder if it might have been better if the normal folk, quote unquote, did see all that, because then
Yeah.
we would realize the extremity of the situation. Um, Now they're no longer getting tons of bodies out of there every morning. It's not like that, but the drug itself continues to evolve. Now they were putting animal tranquilizer into it. Now they're putting insecticides into it. It could not be overstated how bad it is for you. And it continues to have appeal, I think, because it's people, they turn away from the challenge of it's pretty difficult to get out of your difficult situation if you don't have your papers in order, if you have a criminal record, if you have mental health that needs to be treated. These suddenly make it very difficult. I talked to some people who have been homeless and gotten out of homelessness, and they were like, "That was easy. That wasn't a big deal at all." And I'm shocked to hear that.
Hmm.
Talking to somebody on the bus at nighttime, but they'll explain, "Well, it's because I had my ID. I've never been in jail before. I finished school, so I know how to fill out all these papers and make phone calls and so on." Um, but it can be really difficult for people, and the drug seems to have such a magnetic effect of, instead of dealing with problems, you could just be doing this, and all your problems, they leave your brain, they vanish. But this isn't like heroin, where the high lasts several hours. This
Hmm.
lasts 2 to 3 minutes, and then you
Yeah.
have to go. It's just it's such a, and it's a drug that's harder to contain because it's so cheap. And it's in everything. Sort of, if we go back to, it's like the baking soda of now. It's often used
Hmm.
to dilute other
Yeah.
drugs. The problem is, it's baking soda is harmless. Fentanyl is, it kills people.
Yeah.
I can't overstate this. And I realize I'm drifting from the central question, but it's been very sad to watch it take over, and it's primarily attractive to all these young folks. And I think, gosh, if they all pass on, I'm going to be the only one left driving these empty
Yeah.
buses around.
Right.
I want to see these. I want to see this generation thrive. You know, but they feel abandoned by the institutions around them, by the city around them, kind of in the way that a lot of us feel abandoned sometimes by the a political situation where our needs are
Hmm.
not being answered, and there's different levels of feeling abandoned, but they all have overlap.
I was going to ask you, what do you think, is there a common thread, or from people that are on the street?
Hmm.
What's their biggest complaint or their biggest challenge? Is there a common thread of that they feel unseen? Is that most common?
Ignored, dehumanized. I think no one ever asks them what they would like as solutions. Discussions of how to solve homelessness never involve homeless people.
Mm,
And that, I think, will be strange on a longer timeline historically when we look back on this. Why did we think they were unworthy of taking part in these conversations? Um, and also the lack of, when my friends visit from other cities, they're blown away by the state of Third Avenue and these other parts of Seattle. How could this possibly be allowed? And
Hmm.
I have no answer to give them. Um, and in terms of commonality, yeah, they wish for so many different things, but underneath it, it's a lot of we're hoping for the same things. You know, we wish to live a life where we are loved, where we can experience leisure, where we can experience accomplishment, where we are respected, and that is that common thread helps me remember how human these other folks are. And I wish that the folks that were a danger to themselves and others were somehow able to. I don't know how great of an idea it is to just let those folks run around in the
Right.
same playground as
Hmm.
everyone else. Um, but when we look at programs that have been successful elsewhere, Portugal, for example,
Hmm.
had a situation where they were able to eliminate their drug problem pretty thoroughly because if you had more than three drug related arrests, you were forced against your will to go into rehab. You were required to go into these programs and get off drugs. I don't think we could pull that off in our country because here we prioritize individual freedoms. Um, but the compulsory aspect of that piece of legislation in Portugal was probably the reason why it was so effective. I don't know what we would do here that would achieve a comparable result. Um, One of the other things you asked in reviewing the list of your questions that I thought was really interesting was oh boy, where was it? It was about the mental health and drug use.
Yeah, I was gonna. What do you think is the bigger issue out there? I was just going
Yeah.
to ask you that. Do you think we have, a drug abuse issue, or is mental issues more prevalent? Does
Uh-huh.
one stand out more than the other?
I don't feel qualified to give a conclusive answer, but I can comment on my own experience, which is on paper, of course, those two have a lot of overlap. And we think of them as mixing, as having untreated mental health, you're going to turn to drugs because of the cheaper short term solution than other things that are more complex or less available. That makes sense. I've noticed, though, on the street, there actually is something of a clear divide where when I pull into 12th and Jackson, I notice, okay, all these people are addicted to drugs. They are not a threat. Fentanyl, thank goodness, doesn't make people aggressive. It makes them
Right.
docile, and those people are not dangerous. I actually like a lot of those guys. Some of my favorite passengers. It's the folks who are not those people who are standing next to them who have untreated mental health issues where they're throwing things or acting out aggressively or unpredictably. Those are the folks that make me worry about safety. And once we can recognize that separation of like, okay, this is not an entire mob of people that I need to worry about from a safety perspective. It's actually two different things going on. That's helpful for me as an operator. Of course, I want to see everyone um, get better, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really know what the situation is. I also want to comment, just as food for thought for listeners. Enforcement as a word does not. It can refer to many things. It
Hmm.
doesn't just mean throwing everyone in jail.
Hmm.
It can refer to other things where we're going to enforce X, whatever that solution is. You know, we're going to require there has to be some sort of uh, balance.
Yeah, there's got to be a middle ground, right? There's got to
Yeah,
be
exactly.
to keep order. You've got to be able to help people but but also I don't think a passive approach works either, because that's what happened during COVID. It was very passive
Exactly.
approach.
Yeah.
And then, and then you're just letting people kill themselves through, drug addiction
Right.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Or create
there's,
safety issues. Yeah.
right, right. And
Yeah.
there's so many resources out there, and there's plenty of writing about, how, our politicians haven't utilized the funds been given, and people suffer because of that. You, though, you're a witness to it all,
Mm.
and that's what's fascinating about your writing. I'm curious, like, how do you find hope going forward? Because you're a very positive person. You see a lot of negative things, but you
Hmm.
still seem very hopeful.
Wow. Great question. Thanks for asking it. I try to remember not to confuse pessimism and realism. We have to recall that those are not the same thing. I try to be grateful, and I try to I went to watch a play once many years ago. This almost was going to be the beginning of deciding to see, but I took it
Mm,
out. I went to see this play, and the playwright was there on hand to do a Q&A after the play. The play was about uh, uh, mistreatment of women in college campuses. And afterwards, they're doing the Q&A, and then somebody got up and said, well, you know what? We're all here in Seattle, we're all kind of like progressive and left leaning. We probably already agree with all these ideas in the play. How do you reach the people who don't agree? And the playwright was sat there for a long time thinking. And finally, he said, what you're really asking is, how do you change the world? And the answer that he had was, how do you change the world? You don't. You change the person next to you. And
mm,
how do you change the person next to you? By not trying to change them, because you
mm,
can't change other people. What you can do is lead by example and try to model whatever it is, good behavior, etc., etc. And and that can be inspirational to the people around you. I don't have, as a bus driver, I don't have the ability to solve all these problems. I just see all of these outrageous issues going on, and all I can do is bear witness. But I try to be there as a friendly face, as a respectful face. Some of my favorite moments on the 7 would be pulling into 12th and Jackson. It's the middle of the night, still very crowded, and I would get out of my seat to help somebody with their carts or their walkers,
mm,
and I could see everyone's shoulders sort of lower as they realized, "Oh, this guy doesn't look down on us.
mhm.
This is an interaction amongst equals." Um, and that had an inspirational effect. I don't want to take credit for that. I would be helping someone, and that maybe that would cause someone else to help someone else. But I would see that regularly, of
Mhm.
people becoming more friendly than I would expect. And it's very inspiring to see. You know, are humans good or are they evil? Of course, we all contain both of those within us. We all contain conflicting urges and contradictions, and the goodness is always there. And watching it rise within someone and sort of come out is one of my favorite things to witness. And I try to behave in a way that will foster that. They say that only the optimist can be disappointed. Do I get disappointed? Yes, I do
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
But I have to keep going. I
yeah.
have to not give in to that fall where I start becoming more and more jaded and I start looking for negative stuff, because then that's all I'll see. I need to be looking for the positive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's what this show is all about, is finding positive, in different ways, and that's what I love about this conversation and your writing. And I would encourage people to check it out. Um, you're also you're an artist in other forms, photography and filmmaking. If you could just touch on that for a minute, like, what
Sure.
do you have projects going, or what? I mean,
I sure
you're
do.
wearing a lot of hats.
I love wearing a lot of hats. I love moving between the few mediums that I've been trained in, writing, photography, filmmaking. The next project is we're shooting two narrative feature films. We hope to shoot them next year. They're both logistically easy to shoot because they're one location movies, dialogue based. No car chases, no explosions. They'll be easy to put together. But we want to shoot these two movies sometime next summer. They're about relationships, and and very excited to work on that. We're looking for locations. We're trying to do casting. So much to think about. Um, and sometimes going to work to drive the bus is oddly relaxing because it's a shift away from all of that complexity and uncertainty, and just, okay, now all I have to think about is bus stuff for 8 hours. Great, I can
Hmm.
relax. Yeah.
Where can people learn more about you and your writings? And I will put these in the show notes. But you have two books: "The View from Nathan's Bus," and then the second one, "Deciding to See." And where can people find those and find out more about you and all the projects you're involved with?
The two books are sold at any bookstore. The first one, "The Lines That Make Us," "The View from Nathan's Bus," and the second one, "Deciding to See." Yeah, those are. You can find them anywhere that sells books, including online. Of course, I encourage supporting independent bookstores. Elliott Bay Books has been very nice to me. A lot of signed copies are over there. Chin
Hmm.
Music Press, the publisher, free shipping anywhere. I periodically go in and sign all their copies, so you'll get an autographed copy if you order from them. But the book can be found anywhere. It's at the library. And there's more about me on my website, nathanvass.com, just my name. Easy to find.
Yeah,
Tons
it
of
is a
stuff
great,
on it.
they're great, and all the blog articles are there. There's a ton of material on your website. And yes, as a correction, the first book is "The Lines That Make Us." "The View from Nathan's Bus" is the subtitle, right? That's what I used.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the one I read. That's really good. And I've got "Deciding to See" to read next. You've given me a lot to think about, and that's why I wanted to have you on. I hope others read your materials. And it's easy for us. I'm speaking of, my peers and
Sure. Yeah.
that to become jaded, or to maybe look away. And as I've read your material, I'm trying to look at people and see people, for who they are. And your writing inspires that. So I want to thank you, and hopefully it'll encourage more people to do the same thing.
I'm so grateful. That's the most I could ever hope for from having put out these books. So thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate that. It's such a joy to chat.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.